Deku? I think he's some pro. By clouds. My head in the clouds, not coming down. Chapter 88. Escape. The moment that Darby let go of his neck to join the fight, Izuku ran. He was vaguely aware of the chaos happening behind him, but his primary concern was getting out, and getting away. There was only one door that he could see, so he kept low to the ground and went straight there, only to yank on it and realized it was locked. Was there another way out? He hadn't seen any windows, and he didn't have anything on him that would help him pick the lock. There was a small breeze, but that was all the warning he got before a wave of air slammed him through the wall. He groaned and gripped his ribs as he tried to stand up. Well, he supposed that solved the problem of getting out of the room, but it also meant that the fight was no longer contained, and he did not want to be around to see what kind of damage the League of Villains was capable of when they were seriously going for the kill. The marble in his shoe dug painfully into the side of his foot as he ran, but if there was one skill that years of enduring bullies had given him, it was ignoring the pain in favor of surviving. Izuku scrambled around buildings and tried to dodge the rubble that was being thrown in his direction, but he didn't get far before a stray stream of blue flames almost hit him, and he had to scramble backwards. The fire hit the pole of the billboard, which would have been fine except for the fact that the pole was wood, and All For One's next attack shook the ground. Izuku tried to get out of the way, and almost managed it, but a thin layer of dust from Shigaraki's quirk and from the general destruction was already starting to coat everything, and it was just enough to make him slip, and he vaguely heard himself scream as it came down on his leg. He hissed as he tried to pull his leg out, but his leg was definitely broken, and he didn't have a quirk like Uraraka's that would help him lift the thing off him. He desperately looked around for anything that could help him. Maybe if he could cut through the pole, then...
Well, that was quick.
Darby's voice floated through the sudden eerie silence.
I would have thought the king of the underworld would have had more fight in him.
Well, Shiggy did destroy his life support, Magne observed blandly. And I'm sure all this dust didn't help any.
Not to mention that you blew up his extra oxygen tank. So cool!
Twice yelled.
That was below the belt! Shut up!
Shigaraki cut in.
Where's the brat?
Izuku struggled twice as hard, gritting his teeth and ignoring the black encroaching on the edges of his vision as he tried to yank his leg out from where it was trapped. He could hear them spreading out, and it was only a matter of time before they found him. But would he even be able to run if he did? If he escaped and they found him? Oh, how cute, Magne gushed. He's like a little rat caught in a trap. Izuku's shoulders slumped in, well, disappointment seemed too mild, so he wasn't quite sure what he was feeling besides dread, as what remained of the League surrounded him. Shigaraki was limping, and about half of Darby's staples had torn through his skin. But they were obviously alive, and strong enough that recapturing an idiot kid who had already gotten himself pinned was as easy as taking candy from a baby. Shigaraki grinned as he crouched down to look Izuku in the eye.
Well, well. It seems like the quirkless weakling can't even run away correctly. And now that Sensei is out of the way, I can do whatever the hell I want.
Shota looked around at the chaos and grit his teeth in frustration.
What even happened here?
The nearest we can tell is that the League somehow turned on themselves, Sakauchi answered. We're just lucky this didn't happen at night, when this area is busy, but with this much destruction, the rescue teams are gonna have to work overtime. Not to mention all the half-complete Nomus they're pulling from the wreckage.
And the body they found at the epicenter?
Shota asked.
Deku was here. We saw the tracker move. There's a possibility they found it and took it with them, and the body was burnt and disintegrated, so an accurate identification would be...
It wasn't him. Sakauchi cut off. We put the autopsy on rush order, and the body they found was a quirked adult, not a quirkless teenager, and the cause of the death was actually suffocation. Everything else appeared to be overkill. All Might is on his way to make sure, but we suspect that the body we found was all for one. Shota let out a slow breath.
So Deku is at the current tracker location?
He should be. Sakauchi nodded. Is everyone ready? Did you get the League to cooperate?
Nezu is surprisingly good at persuading people, especially the ones who actually want to change society, Shota said. Everyone is ready. We all just need to get into position.
Sakauchi gave a sad smile. You know, we're lucky this is the first time he's been kidnapped. If the villains had caught wind of him back when we still thought he was a retired pro-hero.
Well, they didn't, Shota said firmly. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to go save my kid. Killing him would be a waste when we can just use him for ransom money, Dabi yelled.
Shigaraki looked unhinged.
We can finally kill the brat, and you want to just give him back?
Izuku's leg throbbed as he listened to the League rehash the same arguments for what was probably the 5th time since he was recaptured. He'd been tied to a chair again, and would have been trying to support Dabi's argument if he didn't think calling the League poor would get him killed. Kurogiri and Magne didn't seem to have an opinion on his fate either way, and twice agreed with both of them at the same time, so Izuku's fate was in the hands of a serial arsonist who hated his guts and an unstable serial killer who actively wanted him dead. At least they were still arguing.
Even if he wasn't an annoying little brat, do you really want to give him up to the enemy party?
Shigaraki hissed.
What happens when he levels up? Do you want to fight a boss version of him later? Like he could even do any damage.
Dabi rolled his eyes.
The kid's quirkless. Any one of us could overpower him in our sleep. Fine, but we wait, and those stupid heroes might...
Shigaraki froze as the door opened, and all of the villains turned to face the intruder, ready to attack. Izuku tensed as he pitied the poor person who must have wandered in by accident, but it turned out that he needn't have worried, since the newcomer was far from innocent. The rest of the League relaxed slightly, as Mr. Compress put his hands up in surrender.
Now, dear cast members, is that really a way to treat a friend? I'm not one of those nasty heroes that deserves your wrath. Shigaraki doesn't care who deserves his wrath, Dabi bit out. He just wants to kill everything, even if it means shooting ourselves in the foot. Yeah? Well, this hobo apparently just loves pain, because he wants to let this stupid headache live.
Shigaraki gestured wildly at Izuku, who flinched.
We can do whatever we want now that Sensei's gone, and I want him dead.
I'm glad to see you're all right, Kurogiri said calmly. How did you escape the hero's custody? Oh, you know that a magician never reveals his secrets, Mr. Compress chuckled. "But I'm sure you heard of that trick where the lady is cut in half. So much blood, you know. Forgive me for missing my cue, but I felt it best to lay low until the audience stopped screaming for an encore." Izuku's stomach sank. If one of the villains had escaped, had his classmates gotten caught up in it? Had they been hurt? Someone had been, if Izuku was understanding correctly, and he felt sick with guilt for hoping desperately that it wasn't someone he knew. This is all his fault. Good work. Twice gave one thumbs up and one middle finger. You suck! Mr. Compress turned to Izuku. I see you succeeded in our objective. Yeah, but these two idiots can't decide what to do with the kid. Magne rolled her eyes. What do you think? Do we ransom the brat and kill him later, or just get it over with? Compress hummed thoughtfully and leaned closer to Izuku. I don't know. What do you think, boy? Izuku gulped. I think you guys need the money. Compress lifted his mask so that Izuku, and only Izuku, could see his grin. And he stared in shock as his face melted away. Izuku had barely enough time to catch a glimpse of fangs and yellow eyes before the disguise snapped back into place. Toga straightened, brushing imaginary dust off Mr. Compress's coat as she turned around. Poor boy. Can't even handle a small act of intimidation. Izuku's mind whirled. They've gotten the villain's blood. Toga was here, which meant that the heroes couldn't be that far behind, right? They were coming to save him. He just had to hold out a little bit longer. Just a little bit longer. He could do that. Twice looked at Toga suspiciously. You're a two-face. Don't trust him. Everyone stopped, and Izuku swallowed thickly. This wasn't good. What do you mean? Kurogiri asked slowly. Mr. Compress is one of us. If Twice is agreeing with himself, that's never a good sign, Magne pointed out. A two-face knows a two-face, Twice insisted. That's a fucking imposter. Toga sighed, and she was pouting as she allowed Mr. Compress to melt away. Aw, you're no fun! I liked being him! The League instantly fell into battle stances, but before they could do anything, they were all frozen in Todoroki's ice. Izuku's jaw dropped. You can use their quirks? Toga's grin looked odd on Todoroki's face, as she looked over her shoulder at him. I can use their quirks! Watch this! She ran forward and met Shigaraki's attack with a simple sheet of metal. Her shield wasn't as complex or strong as one of Yayorozu's, but Izuku's supposed iron was simple enough to understand for someone with a blood-based quirk. The shield disintegrated away, but Toga had already partially shifted into Shoji, and grabbed Shigaraki by the leg, throwing him into the air. To everyone's surprise, he stayed there. The fun thing about heroes is the sheer variety! Toga grinned with Seru's face as she started wrapping Shigaraki up. Ochaku's quirk is super cute! It almost makes up for the other kid's ugly elbows! Seconds later, she was Tokoyami, and her own version of Dark Shadow nipped at Shigaraki's ankle as Darby extended his arm. "Toga!" Izuku cried out. "Todoroki or Katsuki!" She managed to switch just in time, and Katsuki pouted as she glared at Darby. "That was super uncute. I'll get to you. Just wait your turn."
"Shut up, you weirdo," Darby growled. "And seriously? You're switching to the frog next? Against a fire user, really?"
"I'm not using Sutran to fight you." Toga giggled as she shot out her tongue and lapped a drop of blood from where she'd injured Shigaraki's ankle. "I'm using her to free him." Izuku tensed as Shigaraki's hand reached towards him, but Toga just grabbed the chair he was tied to. Izuku fell on his butt and shimmied out of what was left of the ropes, as the real Shigaraki finally managed to get a good hand on the tape.
"You cheater!"
Shigaraki screamed.
"You cheating mimic! Die!"
No thanks." Toga spun a sparkling knife between her fingers as she turned into Kaminari. "I'm here to save my friend." Chapter 89. Blood. Toga grinned and shoved her electrified knife into the light switch on the wall, and Izuku flinched as the light surged and then went out. Then there was a crash, and Izuku covered his head as the wall was blown apart beside him. Light filtered in from the street lamps outside, and Izuku could see several figures silhouetted against the darkness. But he didn't have time to tell which heroes they were as the army crawled towards the new opening. A pair of boots stepped out in front of him, and Izuku looked up, finally letting some Midoriya tears fall when Eraserhead crouched down in front of him.
"Hey, problem child. That's a pretty big mess you've gotten yourself into."
Izuku sniffed. "Let me guess. I'm grounded?" Eraser smiled.
"Definitely. Now come on. Let's get you back to school so you can serve your sentence properly. Okay?"
Izuku nodded frantically and tried to stand up, but his broken leg collapsed under the weight, and Eraser had to catch him, using his capture weapon to strap him to his back. Izuku heard Shigaraki start laughing hysterically and froze in terror. That's not a good sign.
"Are you sure?"
Eraser smirked into his capture weapon.
"Did you really think you could just get kidnapped and not have everyone show up to save you?"
Izuku's eyes widened. Everyone? Eraser nodded.
Nighteye even peeked into Toga's future before she left, to make sure we had everything we needed.
Izuku perked up. And do we?
"Almost," Eraser said. "We just need a bit of Kurogiri's blood."
Izuku's eyes were finally starting to adjust to the low light, and the wheels in his head started turning as he took note of Miss Joke, Mr. Brave, and the Melian, alongside the other heroes that had come to save him. "Joke! Use your quirk on Kurogiri!" Joke grinned in response, and Kurogiri's deep laugh echoed around the room. Izuku leaned forward slightly. "Lemelian, use Black Whip to hold him."
"Will do, Deku."
Mirio grinned, and wrapped the warper up, the darkness making hard to tell where one quirk stopped and the other started.
Got him!
Izuku grinned.
Toga! Now!
The other heroes held off the rest of the league, as Toga shifted into Sue and leapt forward over the fight. Kurogiri was still under Joke's hold, so his response was just delayed enough that Toga was able to switch back and slide a knife between two of his armor plates, wiping the blood off with her hand and licking it off her fingers with a smile.
Party's over, Eraser said quietly. We win.
What? Izuku looked around the room. Already? How? He screamed as the four suddenly dropped from underneath them, and he curled himself tighter around Eraser, burying his face in his shoulder as he braced for impact. The jolt was much gentler than he expected, and Izuku opened his eyes when someone started poking his cheek. Deku? Are you okay? Izuku gasped.
Uraraka!
What are you— You shouldn't have come! Uraraka giggled. I didn't come anywhere. You're safe now, Deku.
We're back at UA, Eraser said gruffly. Nighteye foresaw Toga using Kurogiri's quirk, so he made sure she knew the exact location of here, as well as several special holding cells in Tartarus for the rest of the league. As soon as she got his blood, she warped us here and dropped the rest of them straight into custody. You did good, kid.
Don't you praise him, Aizawa.
Recovery Girl griped as she slammed open the door.
Now, as for you, I heard you thought it was a good idea to sacrifice yourself. Of all the stupid, idiotic ways to get yourself injured.
Izuku shrunk in on himself as Eraser set him down on the bed. Sorry, Recovery Girl. It won't happen again. It better not, Uraraka warned. We don't want to lose you, Izuku. He smiled sheepishly. Recovery Girl kept grumbling under her breath as she took a look at Izuku's leg, and Uraraka sat down beside him and squeezed his hand. Thanks for coming back. Izuku shrugged. Thanks for helping to save me. I saw Toga turn into you a few times. Good, Uraraka said firmly. I mean, we all gave her our blood. It was the only way Aizawa could keep us from showing up in person. Thank you for not doing that. Izuku felt his eyelids start drooping as the adrenaline washed out of him like a wave. I'm glad you're safe. He yawned, and Uraraka giggled. Get some rest, sleepyhead. You deserve it. Izuku nodded and slumped against her, asleep before his head even hit her shoulder. You are cleared to proceed. Target is about 200 feet ahead. Aoyama smiled and put his phone away, grateful that Nezu had suggested he cultivate a good relationship with the marketing students. It had been their idea to manage some leaks before the press conference later, and who was better for the job than the sparkling spokesperson of 1A? Of course, they'd had to approve the plan with Nezu, who had been delighted by their proactive thinking and even more pleased with their plan to turn the talking points in their favor. The current narrative that the media had been running with was that of Deku as a weak victim, so if they could introduce a few strategic truths to the debate right when the kidnapping was the only thing that anyone was talking about, then they might be able to set the tone for the questioning this afternoon. Aoyama strolled along the street, making sure that the reporter the marketing team had identified, Taneo Takuda, saw him right before he walked into the coffee shop. He stood in line, keeping his eye on Takuda out of the corner of his eye, as he gave the barista his order and waited for his cup, smiling in satisfaction when he saw the reporter fall into line a few people behind him. After he got his drink and sat down, it didn't take long for Takuda to take the bait and slide into the booth across from him with his own coffee. "Hey, it's pretty busy today. I hope you don't mind me sitting here?"
"Oh, no, monsieur,"
Aoyama assured him. "It's not a bother at all." I apologize for my French. They both sipped their drinks in silence for a few minutes, before Takuda made his next move. "So, forgive me if I'm being rude, but I think I recognize you from the UA Sports Festival? Class 1A, right?"
"Oui."
Aoyama put down his drink. "It's such a sparkling class, don't you think? So many future heroes shining brightly enough that it's practically blinding, no?" Takuda nodded enthusiastically. "I was happy to hear they saved your classmate. You know, the quirkless one that got kidnapped." Aoyama laughed, carefully keeping the look of displeasure off his face. "Oh, monsieur, you make it sound like he didn't do half the work." Takuda's eyes widened. "Really? Perhaps I'm missing part of the story. How about you enlighten me?"
"Well, I'm not really sure I'm supposed to say anything,"
Aoyama said bashfully.
"You are a reporter, no? Why else would you be so curious?"
Takuda smiled and put his hands up in surrender. "All right, you got me. But I'd be willing to keep your name out of it, if you'd prefer. Just an unnamed, anonymous source at UA. How does that sound?" It sounded exactly vague enough to start circulating ideas without making them seem like the opinions of a single student.
"Well, I suppose..."
Takuda pulled out a notebook. "So, you say Deku did half the work?" Aoyama smiled.
"Oui, when he sacrificed himself for the rest of us, he knew he was going to be taken by those fiends, but at least he had the good sense to take a tracker along with him. With their very location being broadcast, the League, well, they didn't have anywhere to run to."
Takuda made a few notes, the interest in his eyes clear. "Did you say that he sacrificed himself? What do you mean by that?"
"I'm not sure I should say."
Aoyama bit his lip.
"But I'm sure you're aware that Deku is quite the talented strategist, no? He even caught the attention of our dear Principal Nezu. Well, I'm afraid he caught the attention of the League as well. They gave him the choice to come quietly or, well, I'm sure we're all grateful that there weren't any major casualties."
Takuda looked like he hit the jackpot, and Aoyama hid a satisfied smile behind his hand. The details were juicy enough that they would catch everybody's attention, and introduce the idea of Deku being the hero he was, rather than a biologically weak victim like everyone was predisposed to think he was.
"Of course," Aoyama continued, "the rest of us did our best to help with the rescue, but our support was mostly from the sidelines, as we won't be getting our licenses until the next exam. Still, our class is quite impressive, no?"
"Extremely." Takuda grinned. "Thanks for the off-record interview, kid. I owe you one." Aoyama watched him leave, and smiled as he took a sip of his coffee. No, thank you. Sakauchi looked over the paperwork for the League of Villain Arrest. A big part of him couldn't believe that it had actually worked, but another part of him knew never to doubt one of Deku's plans. Or, in this case, plans inspired by Deku. With the entire power of Class 1A and the righteous fury of the Hero Underground against them, the League hadn't stood a chance. Kurogiri had been the most difficult to take down, but after Toga had warped away the rest of the League, he didn't have any exact locations to be able to retrieve them, so he couldn't just leave without his teammates. He'd slowed down from the blood loss, so they were able to overpower him in the end, and he was currently being held and observed in Tartarus, just like the others they'd captured during the raid. Which led to Sakauchi's current frustration. As part of their intake into Tartarus, each of the League had undergone a physical and a host of tests, and there was some interesting revelations hidden in the results. Sakauchi didn't even know how to begin breaching the subject of Shigaraki being Nana Shimura's grandson with All Might. So, he figured he'd do the smaller revelation first. Or, well, not smaller, but not directly tied to his best friend and his mystery quirk. Eraser let the phone ring several times before picking up.
Sakauchi, I swear to God, whatever this is, couldn't it wait a day or two?
It could, but I don't think you want it to, Sakauchi responded seriously. The genetic tests turned up something concerning about Kurogiri's true identity.